What if the most dangerous battlefield in Iran right now is not outside its borders? Not the Persian Gulf. Not the missile exchanges with foreign powers. But the mountains, deserts, and forgotten provinces inside Iran itself. Because the biggest threat facing a powerful security state is rarely the enemy it can see. It is the enemy it thought would never rise. For decades, the Islamic Republic of Iran built its military strategy around projecting power outward. It supported allies across the region. It developed missile networks. It expanded influence through militias and proxy forces. It challenged foreign militaries thousands of miles from Tehran. But while the world watched Tehran's external battles, something much closer to home began changing. Along the western frontier, in the rugged mountains of Iranian Kurdistan, small groups of armed fighters began testing the limits of the regime's control. And the question is no longer simply whether Iran can defeat these groups. The real question is, can a government designed to fight external enemies survive when pressure begins rising from within? Because the weapon at the center of this story is not a missile. It is a battlefield Iran has spent decades trying to keep invisible. The Iranian frontier. On a satellite image, Iran appears enormous. A country stretching from the Persian Gulf to Central Asia. A nation with mountains covering much of its western edge. A geography that has protected civilizations for thousands of years. But geography can be both a shield and a vulnerability. The same mountains that make invasion difficult also create spaces where central governments struggle to maintain permanent control. And, in late June and early July of 2026, those mountains became the scene of a new strategic challenge. Iranian state media confirmed a series of violent clashes. In the city of Payvach, 2 members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps were killed outside their homes. At a checkpoint near Bienne, an attack killed 2 police officers and wounded several others. Near Paranshar, fighting broke out between Iranian security forces and Kurdish armed factions. The details varied depending on the source. But one fact stood out. The Iranian government was publicly acknowledging security forces were being killed. And that matters. Because authoritarian governments carefully manage images of control. They show strength. They show stability. They show that the state is everywhere. But when the state begins openly discussing casualties inside its own territory, something changes. The message is no longer just for the public. It is also for the people watching from the shadows. The fighters, the opposition groups, the communities that have spent decades asking one question: how strong is Tehran really? But here's the problem. A few attacks do not automatically create an insurgency. History is full of groups that appeared powerful for a moment and then disappeared. So why does this moment matter? Because timing changes everything. These attacks did not happen during a period of Iranian strength. They happened after a major military confrontation that damaged Iran's strategic position. The country was already dealing with external pressure, a fragile diplomatic environment, economic stress, and questions about internal stability. The Islamic Republic has survived for more than 4 decades because it developed a sophisticated security system. A system built around one central assumption. The center controls the periphery. Tehran controls the provinces. The security forces contain unrest before it becomes a movement. And historically, that strategy worked. But every strategy has a breaking point. And the battlefield Iran is facing now is testing whether that old model still works. To understand why, you have to understand the geography. Western Iran is not just another region. It is part of a larger ethnic landscape that crosses modern borders. The Kurdish population stretches across Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and Syria. The Baloch population extends across Iran and Pakistan. The Awaz-Ira population lies near Iran's oil-rich southwest. For Tehran, these regions have always represented both strategic importance and security concern. The government has invested heavily in monitoring them, deploying security forces, building intelligence networks, maintaining military infrastructure. But there is a hidden cost. Every soldier, every intelligence officer, every military unit positioned internally is a resource not available somewhere else. And that creates the first major contradiction. Iran has built one of the most powerful security systems in the Middle East, but maintaining control everywhere requires resources. and resources become limited when too many problems appear at the same time. The Kurdish question has existed since the founding years of the Islamic Republic. Groups such as the Democratic Party of Iran Army have opposed Tehran for decades. Newer organizations, including PJIK and other armed factions, have also operated in the region. They are not a single unified army. They do not share one command structure. They have different goals, different histories, different relationships with outside actors. And this distinction matters, because the biggest mistake analysts can make is assuming every armed movement automatically becomes a revolution. It usually does not. But the opposite mistake is also dangerous, ignoring separate groups because they are divided. The part most people miss is that fragmented movements can still create strategic problems. They do not need to defeat a state militarily. They only need to force that state to spend more attention, more money, and more manpower. The battlefield is not always about destroying the enemy. Sometimes it is about forcing the enemy to defend everything at once. And that brings us to the first major contradiction. Everyone sees the attacks. Everyone sees the firefights. Everyone sees drones crossing borders and security forces responding. But what they are missing is the strategic calculation behind those events. Iran's opponents are not necessarily trying to defeat the Islamic Republic in a traditional military sense. They may be testing something much more important. They are testing whether Tehran still has the ability to respond everywhere simultaneously. Because power is not just weapons. Power is concentration. A military can be extremely strong when it focuses on one battlefield. The challenge begins when multiple battlefields demand attention. The Iranian response revealed something important. On July 1, Iran launched drone, missile, and rocket strikes into Iraqi Kurdistan. Targets included camps linked to Kurdish opposition groups. The images were immediate. Smoke rising from facilities. Buildings damaged. Local residents recording explosions. The message was clear. Tehran wanted everyone watching to understand. Cross the border, and Iran will respond. But here's the contradiction. A strong response can demonstrate power, but it can also reveal concern. A government confident that a problem is isolated may use limited security measures. A government worried that an idea is spreading may respond much harder. Strategically, this changes the interpretation. The strikes were not only about hitting armed groups. They were also about sending a warning to Kurdish factions, to Balak groups, to minority communities across Iran. The message was, the center is still capable of reaching you. But the bigger question remains, why now? Why after years of relative containment? The answer may be connected to perception. Wars do not only change military capabilities. They change beliefs. A government may lose weapons, but sometimes the more dangerous loss is the perception of inevitability. For decades, many inside Iran understood the risks of challenging the state. The security apparatus was powerful. The consequences were severe. But after a major conflict, when a state appears distracted or weakened, calculations can change. A group that would not act yesterday may decide to act tomorrow, not because it became stronger overnight, but because it believes the opponent became weaker. That is the invisible battlefield. Not territory, not weapons, perception. This is why the Iranian frontier matters beyond Iran itself. Because instability on the edges of a country rarely stays contained. The Kurdish issue connects directly to Iraq and Syria. The Balak issue connects directly to Pakistan. Energy routes, regional alliances, and for unmilitary planning are all affected. A crisis inside Iran would not simply be an internal security problem. It would affect the entire Middle East. But before understanding the global consequences, we have to look deeper. Because the most important part of this story is not the attacks themselves. It is what they reveal about modern conflict. Everyone thinks this battle is about insurgents versus security forces. But the real battle is about something much bigger. Whether a state built around controlling threats from the outside can survive pressure growing from the inside. And that is where the battlefield changes completely. Because the next phase of this conflict will not be decided only in the mountains. It will be decided inside the decision-making rooms of Tehran, where leaders must answer a question every government fears. How many problems can you manage before the problems begin managing you? Everyone thinks this battle is about Kurdish fighters, checkpoints, and border strikes. But the real battle is about something much harder to see. It is about the ability of a state to maintain control when every crisis demands attention at the same time. Because modern conflicts are rarely decided by one dramatic battle. They are decided by pressure. Pressure on logistics. Pressure on leadership. Pressure on public confidence. Pressure on the ability of a government to make thousands of decisions while uncertainty grows around it. And this is the hidden battlefield emerging inside Iran. Not a battlefield of armies moving across borders. A battlefield of attention. The lesson here is important. A government does not need to lose a war in order to become strategically weaker. Sometimes the warning signs appear long before defeat. A military can still possess advanced missiles. A security service can still arrest opponents. A government can still launch retaliatory strikes. But if every action creates a new problem somewhere else, the strategic equation begins to change. This is exactly the challenge facing Tehran. The Islamic Republic built its security model around the idea that it could separate problems. A border issue here. A protest movement there. A for unconfrontation somewhere else. Each crisis handled independently. But what happens when those crises begin overlapping? That is when a security problem becomes a strategic problem. The Kurdish frontier is only one piece of the puzzle. The second piece is unfolding hundreds of miles away in southeastern Iran. Systenemed Balakhistan, a province that looks very different from the mountains of Iranian Kurdistan. On a satellite image, the region appears as a vast landscape of deserts on rugged terrain stretching toward Pakistan and Afghanistan. It is remote, difficult to patrol, and historically challenging for any central government. Here, another long-running conflict has existed for years. The Baloch insurgency. Different groups, different motivations, but the same underlying challenge. The difficulty of controlling a peripheral region where geography, identity, and politics overlap. And this creates another contradiction. Iran has one of the most capable security systems in the region. The Revolutionary Guard has extensive experience fighting unconventional opponents. It has operated in Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, across the Middle East. But fighting abroad and maintaining internal stability are two different missions. External operations allow concentration. Internal security requires constant presence. A military unit deployed overseas can influence events. A security unit at home must watch roads, cities, borders, communities, and political movements simultaneously. The part most people miss is that internal security is expensive because it requires permanence. You cannot leave. You cannot declare victory. You have to keep watching. And every new crisis expands the number of places that require attention. This is where the concept of the invisible battlefield becomes critical. The weapon is not always the rifle, the missile, or the drone. Sometimes the weapon is uncertainty. A small armed group may not have the capability to defeat a state, but it can create uncertainty. Where will the next attack happen? Which province requires more troops? Which border needs more surveillance? Which political group is becoming more active? Every unanswered question forces the government to spend resources. And resources are the currency of strategic power. The bigger picture is that Iran is facing a classic strategic dilemma. Concentrate forces in one region, and another region may become vulnerable. Spread forces everywhere, and every response becomes weaker. This is the same challenge that has shaped conflicts throughout history. Large empires often struggled, not because they lacked power. They struggled because power had to be divided. The Roman Empire faced it. The Soviet Union faced it. Modern states continue to face it. The question is not always, how strong is your military? The deeper question is, how many problems can your military solve at the same time? But there is another layer. Politics. Because insurgencies are not only military problems. They are narratives. They depend on perception. A government tries to project control. Opposition groups try to project momentum. The battle is fought through images, statements, videos, social media. Every attack becomes a message. Every retaliation becomes a message. Every casualty becomes a message. The physical battlefield may be small, but the psychological battlefield is enormous. This is why the response from Tehran matters so much. When Iran launches strikes across borders into Iraqi Kurdistan, it is doing more than targeting fighters. It is sending a signal to neighboring governments, to opposition movements, to its own population. The message is, the state still has reach. The state still has power. The state still controls escalation. But here's the problem. Signals only work if people believe them. And when a government repeatedly demonstrates force, observers begin asking another question. Is this confidence? Or is this fear of losing control? That uncertainty itself becomes part of the conflict. Now at the international dimension, because Iran's internal security problems do not exist in a vacuum. The Kurdish regions connect directly to Iraq. The Balak regions connect directly to Pakistan. Iran's relationship with neighboring governments becomes increasingly important. If Tehran believes opposition groups are using foreign territory as safe zones, pressure on those governments increases. This creates a dangerous cycle. Iran conducts cross-border operations. Neighboring states protest. Militant groups exploit the tension. The security environment becomes more unstable. A local insurgency begins affecting regional diplomacy. And this is where energy and economics enter the story. Iran is not just a country with internal security challenges. It is located near some of the world's most important energy routes. The Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, regional oil infrastructure, global shipping lanes. Any major instability inside Iran creates uncertainty far beyond its borders. Markets do not only react to what happens, they react to what could happen. A small conflict near a strategic location can create a global economic effect because investors price risk before damage occurs. Thousands of miles away, traders watch energy prices move. Companies review supply chains. Governments evaluate contingency plans. A security problem in one province can become an economic problem across continents. The lesson here is that modern warfare is no longer separated into categories: military, economic, political, information. They are connected. A drone strike in one region, a political statement in another, a market reaction somewhere else. They are all part of the same strategic system. And Iran's challenge is that pressure is arriving through multiple systems at once. But there is another question. Could this actually become a serious internal threat to the Islamic Republic? The answer requires caution. History shows that governments facing unrest often recover. States have survived insurgencies before. A few months of violence does not automatically transform into national collapse. The Iranian government still has powerful institutions, a large security apparatus, experienced intelligence services, and significant ability to use force. The mistake is assuming either extreme. Iran is not automatically collapsing, but it would also be a mistake to ignore the strategic warning signs. The important issue is not whether one attack changes everything. It is whether multiple pressures begin reinforcing each other. Think about the difference. One fire is manageable. A government can send firefighters. But multiple fires across different locations create a different problem. The challenge becomes coordination, prioritizations, decision-making. That is the strategic pressure Iran faces. A Kurdish problem in the northwest, a Balak problem in the southeast, external military pressure, economic challenges, leadership uncertainty. Each issue alone may be manageable. Together, they create a much more complicated battlefield. This is why the February war and its aftermath matters so much. The conflict did not simply damage military assets. It changed perceptions. It created a moment where different actors began reassessing the balance of power. Foreign adversaries, regional governments, opposition groups, even domestic communities. War changes calculations. And sometimes the most important consequence of war is not what happens during the fighting. It is what people believe is possible afterward. Strategically, this changes how we should watch Iran. The question is not, can Iran defeat a small insurgent group? The answer is probably yes. The more important question is, can Iran prevent several different groups from believing the state is weaker than before? Because once that perception spreads, the security challenge becomes much harder. A state can fight fighters, But fighting an idea is different. The future battlefield may not look like a traditional war. There may not be large armies crossing borders. There may not be one decisive battle. Instead, the conflict may appear as a series of small events. An attack here, a strike there, a political crisis somewhere else. Each event individually limited, but together creating strategic pressure. This is how modern instability often develops. Not through one explosion, through accumulation. And that leads to the final question. The question is no longer whether Iran can respond to individual attacks. The real question is whether a government built around projecting strength can maintain that image when every direction demands a response. Because in modern warfare, the strongest weapon is not always the weapon that destroys the most. Sometimes it is the weapon that forces an opponent to make impossible choices. So the debate is not simply about who has more fighters, more missiles, or more territory. It is about who can manage complexity better, who can absorb pressure longer, who can keep decision-making clear when uncertainty spreads everywhere. Because future conflicts may not be won by the side with the biggest army. They may be won by the side that can survive the most simultaneous challenges. The real question is, do you believe modern wars will be decided by military strength alone, or by which governments can manage pressure from every direction at once?